Kick me. Kick me. What was that? An exhibition? We need emotional content. Try again. I said emotional content, not anger. Now try again. With me. That's it. How did it feel to you?
Let me think.
Don't think. Feel. It is like a finger pointing away to the moon. Don't concentrate on the finger or you will miss all that heavenly glory.
My buddy's gonna get a real kick out of the fact that I played that clip. This one's for him, and it's a very compelling clip. It's from Bruce Lee's Enter the Dragon, and I think it has a lot of emotional content. It's one that kind of makes you think, like, what does he mean by that? And it makes you reflect. Maybe it makes you think, which is not what you're supposed to be doing. But I think that, you know, as much as I want Go to be an international game and to be seen as an international game, not just for those in East Asia or those interested in East Asian culture, but for everyone, I can't help but think that there's so much from East Asian philosophy and culture that meshes so well with the game of Go. And things like these sayings, like the Bruce Lee is saying, I just think of Go when it comes to it. And funny enough, I was watching Mulan yesterday with my fiance, and I hadn't seen it in 20 years or so, or I don't even know how long, but I was noticing so many things that I had never noticed before. And one of the things was near the end of the movie when the bad guy's like taking the emperor captive, and he's asking the emperor to bow to him. And the emperor responds, "No matter how the wind howls, the mountain cannot bow to it." And I think that's just like a modification of another well-known proverb. But something like that, as simple as that, it has nothing to do with Go. It feels like it has so much to do with Go. At least to me, when I think about it, all I do is imagine some player who is just, you know, being super aggressive everywhere on the board, asking and goading the opponent to join in the blunders and the aggressive moves and the greed. And if you're a good Go player and you just play like a mountain, like the stone Buddha, you know, Ichangho, you just play what you want to play because you know it to be true, then you'll win the game and you'll overcome. And I feel like there's a lot of stuff from the Buddhist and Taoist philosophies that really tie well together with the game of Go. Welcome to Start Point, the show about Go for Go fans, away from the board. And today, that clip, it's gonna be kind of what we're talking about today. Not necessarily the emotional content, which I think is a very esoteric way of looking at Go, in terms of like how you should manage your emotions and use emotional content to play your moves. I think I would want to talk about that as well, but today more about intuition and feeling, in the sense not of emotion, but more like the feeling of your moves. The definition of intuition, according to Oxford, is the ability to understand something immediately without the need for conscious reasoning. And I think that is such a critical part of Go, and especially with super beginners of Go. I think a lot of super beginners, ones who are just introduced to the game, spend way too much time thinking. It's funny because we always tell people to read and calculate and think before they move, but the opposite problem is often true as well. They waste so much time trying to figure out what the best move is. They don't give themselves a chance to learn and feel the right moves. There is a part of you that is subconscious that learns Go, and in order for that part to learn how to play Go, you do need to step back and not think so much for some time. I mentioned a couple episodes back, I think it's the one with in an episode with Sean, about a book called Blink by Malcolm Gladwell. And I wanted to review that example that I gave about the statue a little more in detail. I went back to the book and reviewed the story, and I want to share with you how intuition was stronger than reasoning and logic and calculation in this particular example, and then we'll tie it back to how that applies to Go. So this book called Blink by Malcolm Gladwell, and there are a few books like this out there. This isn't the only one, but this one, it's about the ability to think without thinking and what first impressions can do and the intuitive thought that comes to our mind can do for us. And the introductory example that Malcolm Gladwell brings is an example of a statue acquisition by the Getty. And the statue is known as a kouros, which I guess is just an ancient Greek, particular statue style of an ancient Greek statue. And the Getty had acquired a 6th century statue called a kouros, known to be only 200 in existence. And most of them were damaged. This one was in great condition, and the asking price was about $10 million. And of course, when an organization like this acquires such a valuable historic statue, they're not going to just look at it and say, oh, great, thanks for, and just take it. They're going to do their research, right? And so when they dug into that research, they found the statue to be very consistent with a very specific time and location, style. So it was, according to the experts, looking like something that actually existed back then. They had a documentation of where it came from, so they had a trade history of the statue, where it changed hands, and then they took a geologist and they spent months studying this statue, spending a lot of resources trying to figure out the authenticity of it so they don't make a bum purchase. But then along came an Italian art historian named Federico Zeri, and he's not doing any experiments. He's not doing multiple day labs with the statue. He's just looking at the statue, and within 2 seconds, he found himself staring at the statue's fingernails without knowing why, and just felt like something was off. Another expert, this one an expert on Greek sculpture, came in. And she walks in and she sees the statue, and the museum director says, it's not ours yet, but it will be in a couple of weeks. And all she could say was, I'm sorry to hear that. She also found something to be off with the statue. And finally, another one named Thomas Hoving, the former director of the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, I guess he had a habit of noting the first word that comes to mind whenever he sees something new, which is a funny habit to have. I think it's a very good practice for a director of art or a museum of art or something like that. And the word that came to mind when he saw the statue was fresh. And that is not the right word to be using for a 6th century BC ancient Greek statue. And all of these experts, they made these snap judgments, these intuitive evaluations, but they didn't fully understand themselves why they felt that way. They didn't think about it. It's not like Sherlock Holmes looking at the Kuros and saying, well, because this statue has this color and this sheen and, has this layer right here at the bottom and the the chipped off portion here does not match blah, blah, blah example and blah, 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 blah. They're just looking at it. They're just looking at it and going, that doesn't look right. And Thomas Hoving, the last example, the one who called it fresh, thought about it later and realized, looking at statues come out of the ground, anyone who's seen a statue come out of the ground, uncovered by archaeologists, they don't look like that statue. That's not what they look like. And he felt that it was dipped in the best latte at Starbucks. I don't know what the best latte at Starbucks is. If he thinks that Starbucks is some kind of premier, maybe he's not a coffee expert, but these people, they all had enough expertise to look at the statue and immediately sense that something was wrong and feel that something was wrong. They didn't do logical analysis of it. And the Getty had spent months and money and time to try to do a logical analysis of the statue, and they were not able to figure out that this statue was, spoiler alert, a fake. A very well done fake. So when you look at this story and you look at the difference between this logical reasoning, the scientific kind of analysis versus these three people who just look at it and they say, nah, not really a good statue. You wonder, why some people have that ability and how we can use that ability for things that we're trying to get better at and evaluate things more accurately, like in Go. I'm thinking, as an analogy, this example of evaluating the statue with a snap 2-second judgment, how many times are we able to use that ability in Go? And I'm thinking of a few examples here. For example, a group on the board just looks fishy to you, right? I remember playing a game and I'm playing, and this has happened more than once for sure. I'm playing moves in other places and I'm just looking at this one corner that we both played and kind of played as if it was alive. But I'm just thinking that looks like it's not fully alive. It doesn't look like, it looks killable. I don't know what it is about it. I didn't figure out if it's killable, but what I feel is that it looks killable and I'm drawn to it. And I feel like that skill is probably something that's not very much talked about in Go, or the way we talk about it is not very much like the way I'm about to describe it. The group that you look at, we often say, look at the group and check if it's alive by reading and calculating. That much is obvious. Yes, we must do that in order to verify what we're looking at. And we also say, learn these shapes. We also say, take these shapes into your library of knowledge, your repertoire, and we also say, have a lot of experience. But we don't say, look at the shape. Can you tell me if it feels alive or dead? And I feel like there are a lot of shapes and groups that you would present to a lot of people from various skill levels, and they would give you widely different judgments of whether that shape looks alive or dead. And you would see that as players get stronger, they would get more and more accurate. That definitely looks like it's alive. That definitely looks like it's dead. And I think that's very true because often when I think stronger players evaluate a group and they say that's definitely something that, doesn't look like it's fully alive, they may not know how to kill it, but they know it can be killed. You know what I'm saying? I feel like this happens a lot, and it's good to be aware of this ability and this sense to have to be able to evaluate and to listen to that part of yourself that's saying that looks dead, that looks alive, that looks like it's not worth your time. I don't think we maybe talk about that part of the game enough, and we focus so much on the objective and the logical side of it. Another example that comes to mind is, you ever have one of those games where, maybe you're ahead and it's approaching endgame and you're pretty settled. You're like, you know what? I feel pretty good about this game and I'm going to close this up. We're going to play our endgame moves. And your opponent plays this endgame move and you're looking at it and you're thinking, well, I don't think that does anything. So I can respond in an optimal way, but something feels off. Something feels dangerous. Something feels shaky. And so you respond to it in a safer way than usual. Something that maybe you would concede a couple points with, but you find it to be suspicious. And you don't want to put your whole game on that suspicion and risk losing everything. Because if that endgame move happens to breach your territory and break through, then you lose the game. So why not play the safe move? And I feel like that move, that kind of move, it can really mess with you sometimes, because when you do it too much, this is the flip side of intuition. It's like you become, you think you're using intuition, but you're actually using habit. And I think we have to distinguish those two, because sometimes when you do that, I think this is what I went through in terms of endgame, is I was traumatized by so many endgame blunders that I decided to be safe in the endgame. And there was a period of time when I was just playing the safe move for endgame all the time, no matter what. And that led to losses. And, it's obviously not good to just lock in that rule. You have to use your intuition and reasoning at all times. Another type of thing that I feel that can come to mind when we're talking about feeling and intuition is when your opponent makes a move that looks kind of normal, like quiet almost, but you suddenly get the sense that they're up to something. And it makes you check, makes you read more around the area. What is he doing? What are they doing? And then you realize, oh, they're planning X, Y, and Z, and this move is just the first part of that entire plan. And without that spidey sense, I guess, of intuition and feeling that comes up during certain moves, you may not have investigated that. And so the point is, if we focus only on pure logic and calculation, counting up points and finding the AI move and making sure everything is read out perfectly, if we're so focused on those things, we might miss these insights that come up from our feelings, from our guts, from our subconscious, that can inform us about very valuable things on the board. Let me give you another example of this kind of snap judgment working out for something in the context outside of Go. There was a researcher named Gary Klein who did, I think he'd studied and specialized in decision making and how our neurological processes work that stuff out. And one of the things that he found out was in the example of a young lieutenant firefighter who was called out to a simple house fire. And the flames of the house fire were coming from the back of a single family one-story home. So, this is a sign. It's kind of very likely that it's from the kitchen, right? And the strategy for taking out a fire that starts in the kitchen is they just send the hose crew into the house and they attack the fire from the inside. And so they go in and then they look at the kitchen, the fire, and they start spraying it with water. And the firefighter ordered the water to be turned off just to see how the fire behaves. But the fire didn't really get affected and just came roaring back with basically the same amount of intensity as it did before. And so, okay, they thought that was funny. So they sprayed the fire again, and turned off the water, and no result. It was just not very effective, like a bad Pokemon attack. But so, you know, it's a little bizarre, but it's like, I feel like the average person would be like, well, that's weird. Let's just keep hosing it down and see if, you know, maybe it needs a little more water. But this firefighter, with his experience, became tremendously uneasy. Felt like something was very, very wrong. And he ordered his whole crew to evacuate the building because he did not like the signs that he was seeing. And just as they left, the living room floor collapsed and there was a basement fire that none of the firefighters knew about. And when Gary Klein asked why he evacuated the firefighters from the house, obviously there's that, you know, bizarre behavior from the fire, but is that really enough justification to evacuate and stop trying to fight the fire? His reasoning was he thought he was psychic. He thought he had ESP. I think that sometimes very insightful intuition can really make you feel like you're a bit psychic. I had a couple moments like this before, actually, that come to mind. One of them is that my dog, we had left him in our house for a weekend. We were worried about how he had done, because, you know, we were kind of new dog owners, and we didn't know, like, oh, you should probably get a dog sitter. And we left him in the house, and we came back, and he's super happy to see us. He was kind of stressed, and we never did that again. But I was relieved, and I just go back to the car to get my luggage and get my family's luggage and things like that. And something came over me, and this is more of like a, I don't know if I heard something, but I didn't want to pick up any more bags, and I just left, and I went back in the house, and there had been an accident, and my dog was seriously injured by a falling guitar, you know, it was a very stressful time for us. But this story comes to mind because of that weird moment when I was outside, and there's almost no cue, and there was no reason for me to not bring the bags out, but I just had to go inside, and it's just these weird things. So, I mean, it can really feel like ESP sometimes, but obviously we're not trying to hone our psychic abilities to play a better game of Go. But what can we do to improve our game and intuition? Because when you look at these experts that have this fine-tuned sense of intuition that are able to inform them about very important things regarding the things that they experience in their field, you wonder, like, what is it that they have that allows them to properly evaluate? And can I use that evaluation skill to get better at Go? But, you know, most of all, like, snap judgments are terrible in general. Think about, you know, things that are bought on impulse because you felt like that was the right choice, and you just spent a whole bunch of money on something that you didn't need. We even have a saying, don't judge a book by its cover. And it's like, you can't look at a person and think that you don't like them and just judge them for that snap judgment that you make. A lot of people that I felt like, you know, I didn't really gel with in the beginning ended up to being my best friends. And so it's very hard to say that, like, you just have to depend on your intuition all your life. I don't think that's right. You know, for a silly example of that, you know, imagine you're a kid, and you guys remember Tide Pods? I mean, they're still a thing, but fortunately, people don't. Hopefully, I'm sure they do, but people don't eat them anymore. There was a trend, like, they just probably looked at the Tide Pod, and their intuition told them this looks like food, and they popped it in their mouth, and that's terrible. That's not the right kind of intuition. So, how do we harness the right kind of intuition? I think it has to do with the experience that we build up These experts, the firefighter and the statue experts, they all had a lot of experience dealing with what they're dealing with. And the type of experience that they had, what I believe is that they all had in common is that, first of all, there's a big volume of experience that they're drawing on that fed their subconscious. And second of all, I think that what's important in their experience is that they went through a lot of evaluation and found the results of those evaluations. So, for example, the statue experts, they studied different sculptures and they were able to look at the sculptures in great detail, paying attention to all these different things and these cues, and they were able to look at what it actually was. Was it a fake? What time period it was in? And they were able to match real knowledge with these observations that they were able to use visually, and just any kind of cue that can come with a statue. And then with the firefighter, he's quelled countless fires. I'm sure he's seen all these different situations, how fire behaves in certain rooms and certain strengths, and how it behaves when you spray water on it, how it usually flows, and how hot it gets. So many different cues, and he's able to see upon post-mortem as well what happened, what kind of fire was it, where was the source, and what was the best way to put it out. And all of these evaluations, they're able to look at details and let their body soak in fine details about the cues of what's going on, and then also find out what actually is the truth and match those cues to the truth. And so how can we use that for Go? Well, I have an idea, and I'm going to try this out. First of all, before I get to my idea, this is something I've been preaching. It's playing games and playing a lot of games so that you have a volume of games. And that's not the only surefire way to improvement. There are diminishing returns with that, but it can help build a good foundation of experience when you've seen so many endgame moves and attacking moves and groups die and live so many times. That starts to feed into your intuition and tell you, hey, this group is alive, this group is dead, this endgame move is a bad move, this one is necessary. And when you're doing this, it's always better to be evaluating and thinking while you do it. I'm telling you to think in this episode about feeling, but also feel, right? When you're playing these games, you should take the moment to imbue your game with emotional content and not play out of habit and play like a robot and just let your hand move on its own. It's a tough balance to strike. So that is the standard way, but I have a new idea on how to do this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to download a whole bunch of SGFs, and I'm going to go move by move. Maybe I'll have some checkpoints like 50 moves in, and I'm going to evaluate who's going to win the game, who's winning, and try to use my snap judgment to do that, and then compare with the result. And I feel like going through a large volume of this and evaluating and going through the details of what's going on a lot, and then finding out what actually is, can be very similar to the playing games aspect of it. And I want to try to see if I can train myself to have a better eye and be more detailed about what I'm thinking about, and look at games objectively and try to simulate the many fires that a firefighter has to put out by looking at a ton of SGFs and try to predict who's going to win at different points of the game. And because I think that when you just play games, it's hard to be logical and objective sometimes. It's hard to take yourself out and evaluate properly, and then you also kind of forget what you were thinking at certain points because you're working so hard to win at the game. So hopefully this idea bears some fruit. I will try to commit to doing that and get back to you on what happens. I'm going to have to do some hand picking of the right kinds of games when I do this experiment, because there's going to be a lot of differences. First of all, like let's say you're looking at two triple-digit Q, or not triple-digit Q, that'd be crazy. TPKs, 20-plus Q players play. It may be very difficult to find. Even the best Go player is not going to be able to tell you like who's going to win that game. And then it gets more and more predictable as the players get better. And then there also will be ones where there's a skill gap, and maybe there's a strong, steady increase of win percentage over the course of the game because this player is just simply better. And to be able to recognize what's happening as soon as possible, I think is also something that's going to be important. And then on the other hand, so there's who is winning is as one evaluation type, and then the other hand, there's who's gonna win, which is a more like it's a more difficult and vague question, because I'm wondering if there's an ability to see the player's habits and tendencies and predict whether that player will be end up being the loser, whether they are winning or losing at the moment or not. There are two separate things, one being the evaluation of who actually is winning, and basically you can match that one-to-one with what the AI evaluation is at that particular point of the game. And the other one is, can you predict the result at the very end of the game based on what you're seeing now? I will see what I find most natural and valuable as I try this experiment, and I'll get back to you on that. But now it's time for the DDK Advice Corner. And the tip of the day is, if your stones are all in the same areas, something is wrong. That should perk up your spidey sense Go intuition, because this is a concept called over-concentration. So when your Go stones are just seem to be hanging out together, they're like cliques or cliques, depending on how you want to pronounce it, and they're just kind of huddled in certain areas, that's not generally a good thing. Now, this is tricky because Go stones do huddle together sometimes, and that's because of urgent moves. Urgent versus not urgent is an important concept to learn, and the reason why we stick stones next to each other because we're playing very urgent moves. And so once we get out of that urgency, we would want to spread our wings, spread our stones everywhere as far and wide as possible in the biggest areas. If our stones couldn't die, we would just take the biggest area every move. But sometimes our stones die and we have to protect them. We have to make good shape. And so that's why we stick stones in the same corner for a while before we move on. Sometimes that corner fight turns into this whole dragon thing that never leaves and leaves this huge swath of empty board space out. But generally speaking, you should try to spread your stones out, especially when you're playing non-urgent moves. So when you're playing too many stones in the same quadrant of the board, same area of the board, something's wrong. Try not to do that. And you can actually evaluate the game that way, like the statue experts. If you look at the game and you see some over-concentration of stones, you can often say, like, hey, this person doesn't seem like they're going to win the game. So that was the DDK Advice Corner, and it's time for listener mail. Eliezer writes, hello, I have a recent story that is sort of connected to the episode about Go tournaments and AI. I am currently in an online casual tournament where they aren't clear about how to send challenges to your opponent, so it's generally decided by the players when to play and what is allowed. There is a standard Byoyomi with 3 periods. As the game was ending, I saw that I was ahead and was not as cautious with endgame moves as I should be. Oh, this sounds like a familiar story that I was telling you. Continuing on, the problem was I used the auto score during the game and saw a large dead group of his, but during the game I couldn't figure out how to kill it. I ended up solving it the next morning. At the end of the game, we were using OGS to count points, and I accidentally allowed the opponent to count the group as a Seki instead of dead, which caused him to win by 3 points. We ended up calling the group Seki since we couldn't continue the game, plus we were both done playing since it was late and we didn't want to figure out the game. When we set the scores in for the tournament, they said that the group was dead and that I won. My question is, do you count autoscore as cheating in a game? And were the tournament administrator's right to go by the objective board instead of what the players agreed on. I have attached the SGF file to review. Unrelated to this story, but I also missed the Go news and would love for that section to return. Thanks for always giving me an interesting lesson during my commute to school. Eliezer. Thanks so much for writing in, Eliezer, and I'm sorry about Go news. I will try to update you on the happenings. I'll see if I can do a little more research on Go News and sprinkle some Go News into the episodes again. But thanks for your feedback on that. And then in regards to your game, you know what? Let me take a quick moment to review the SGF file first. Okay, I took a good look at your game here, and that's actually, I found so this is actually bent 4 in the corner. But you didn't complete the bent 4 in the corner. You know, so for those of you out there who know bent 4 in the corner, you know there's a way to create a bent 4 in the corner, which involves like a seki, like kind of like it's like 3 stones in a row, and then there's 2 spaces forming this L kind of shape, and then you can activate the bent 4 in the corner, which is why it's treated that way. If you don't know what bent 4 in the corner is, look that up. It's a little bit difficult to understand. But basically, if you were to play in the A1 position, or the 1-1 position as black, then you would have gotten what looks like a seki, right? But it's actually not a seki, because you can always play 1-2, which creates bent 4 in the corner. They're forced to capture, and then you can actually have this ko situation. But you can play this anytime during the game, which you would basically remove all the ko threats hypothetically, and then play this move and kill the group because they have no more ko threats. But what I found interesting is that your tournament administrator decided this group was dead, but it's not really, because when white plays that first move, because you haven't played the move that is required in order for this to be bent 4 in the corner. So if white plays there first, white now has a ko that it can use to become alive. So I don't know why they deemed this to be a dead group. It's actually just unsettled. I also don't know how your OGS scoring system decided it was a seki, but that's I guess a different discussion. So in regards to the first part of your question about auto score, so yeah, that's not in the spirit of the game. When you use auto score during the game, I'm assuming you're talking about auto score in terms of like when you decide to pass and you're able to evaluate the board and then you resume the game, like when you basically agree with your opponent that you're ending the game, and then you go back and play because the evaluation told you something new. That's really not in the spirit of the game. It's also kind of something hard to avoid with online games. Unless you're talking about score estimate, I think that just depends on your agreement. Like if you guys agreed on a game where estimates were allowed, then like, although I don't think that you should use estimates during a game, if it's a competitive tournament game and you agree on a certain set of terms, those terms are golden, and that's what you play by. If you should use those estimates, I mean, depending on your personality, right? But in terms of the auto score, yeah, that's just a little bit of an unavoidable thing with Go, where in online play, you decide with your opponent, hey, I end the game with you, and it's time to score. And then you look at the score and you're like, wait a second, this group, the score is telling me this group's alive or this group is dead. I'm gonna not agree with the result of this game, and I'm gonna continue playing so that I can figure that out and play. It's not supposed to happen, but it's almost unavoidable. And I would say, just as a, as a player, I would recommend that you don't do something like that, where you don't try to take that into account. And if you really believed the game was over and you thought a group was dead or whatever, and you go to autoscore the game to try to use your most honest evaluation of that and end the game there. In regards to your game, I guess you thought that, you thought it was alive, I assume, and that you used autoscore and that's what signaled that it may have been dead. This is a tricky situation because, like, imagine a game where both players are very new, and they just deem certain groups to be alive and certain groups to be dead, and they're just totally wrong. And the entire board is just evaluated wrong. I don't think it's right to tell those players like, hey, that's the result you guys agreed on and that's the game. I think it's more correct to go in, evaluate the game for them and say, hey, you're wrong about this evaluation. This group is actually alive. This group is actually dead. And I think it's more about the fuzzy situations where it may or may not be alive or dead, depending on who agrees on what and what, you know. In these special situations, I do think that it's better to go with the consensus between the two players. Like in your situation, if you guys both agreed it was Seki, I honestly think, I don't know, it's tough. It's tricky. I don't know how to... I don't know, actually, I think I want to put this question out to the listeners out there, what you guys think. Like, these two players, they came to a bent 4 in the corner, which is a dead group, but they didn't see it, and they didn't know how to evaluate it, so they agreed it was Seki. But then, when someone who knows how to evaluate the game properly looks at it and says, that's bent 4 in the corner, what should they do? Should they tell them that's bent 4 in the corner and that's dead and give the winner, allow that person to win, or should they step out and say like, look, I'll teach you what this is afterwards, but since this is your evaluation, that's the game result. I'm curious because I'm not really sure. And then I just want to reiterate again, I don't know why your tournament administrators evaluated this as bent 4 in the corner when it wasn't complete. Like the bent 4 in the corner, so just for those people who are curious and they just want more detail about what the shape was, imagine bent 4 in the corner, but instead of filling in the three in a row stones, the 1 point isn't filled. So it's just 2 stones, and it's waiting to be filled either by black, who is inside, by the way, black who's inside, or white, who can play a stone there and start a ko. So I don't know why they just said that was dead, because it wasn't fully killed yet, so you didn't know how to kill it. So I think that my honest judgment is that they should have won this game, but you know, whatever they say, honestly, is what goes. That's the point of tournament administrators. It's their job to solve these edge cases. So a lot of tricky stuff. Very interesting email. Thanks for the SGF. That was interesting to look at, Eliezer. And thanks so much for your support and listening to the show. And Jairubik writes, in my opinion, Go is 50% skill and 50% mental. Unfortunately, a Go teacher only focuses on the skill aspect without talking about the mental aspect. Oh my goodness, this is what I'm saying. I 100% agree. A lot of Go teachers just like to share what they know about the game, and they don't really train you, right? Continuing. The easiest example is how to deal with Sanrensei as white. Most teachers would only point out variations, reductions, invasion techniques. This approach is okay, but could be better. First of all, I would encourage the student to play as the black side of Sanrensei, observe how white deals with it, eventually playing as both sides back and forth, all while keeping track of your own feelings and anxiety levels during the process. This method will create a positive feedback loop naturally before exposing them to the more advanced technique. Oh, that is 100% correct. I love that. Go out there and experience the Sanrensei a bunch of times without trying to teach them what it is before they've experienced it enough times. I think this is, it actually ties really well to the message of this episode. And but it's funny that you're mentioning Sanrensei as if it's something that people have to deal with nowadays. I don't think people really play Sanrensei anymore. But continuing on, being calm is very important in Go, and training this kind of mental trait early is better than discovering it later. AI can help with variation, but can't teach how to handle the fluctuations of human emotion. AI is so advanced that it can run at light speed, but can't teach a human how to stand up, learn to walk, then jog, and eventually run at full speed. Only those world-class runners are able to comprehend AI magnificence before imparting the knowledge to the toddler learning to walk. If the toddler learns directly from the AI without any human guidance, it would be a disaster. Very interesting. I wonder how much experience Shinjin-so had with AI as he was training. I think he's basically kind of like the in-between generation where AI was introduced as he was training. to become a Go player. So we'll have to see what the full AI students look like later on in the future. Basically those who started playing Go in 2016. So like, let's say they were 4 years old in 2016. So those would be like people who were born in 2012. So they'd be like 12 now. So, you know, they're coming up. The people who have been super AI immersed. So we'll see what what happens with those players. But I agree. There needs to be a mentor, a human-to-human relationship in order for true growth to happen, whether you're using AI as a strong tool or not. Thanks for the insights, and Gyrobic. And then Page Edict writes, I think there are different levels of teaching. I think at the most basic level of teaching, a teacher can do game reviews and teaching games, which is something that you will see with most teachers, and a lot of the lessons will be focused on showing you variations you could have played right or done better. If your teacher is extra good at these, they will also tell you the things you have done right and encourage your good moves / variations. That's a tricky thing to do as a teacher. By the way, Paige is she's a known teacher in the Go community, and I actually took a very basic tenet of my training from like an old comment of hers back in the day. I think it was like something about repeating the same problem set over and over again. That really inspired me to try that, and it was very effective for me. And so since she has a lot of experience teaching people Go, seems like there's a lot of wisdom to be imparted here from this comment. Let's continue. The step that I would like to see more teachers take, though, is that you don't often see in a basic level of teaching, that I think should be a basic level of teaching, is helping students with tangible ideas. A lot of teachers will sound like record players, showing you variations repeatedly, which is something that AI can do. It is often good to try and find habits in the way that a player plays and help point toward those as the teacher. All things that this is exactly how I feel about how Go should be taught. Continuing, one common habit in double-digit Q that you will find is that they get Atari'd down to the first line and they will play it out until the stones are captured. Pretty obvious thing to work on. And it's also not incredibly hard to break with enough games. However, as we get stronger as players, we forget to a point what it is like to be so new. So we gloss over or write these things off as just being DDK, and it will eventually get better if my student just plays enough games. But they can get out of DDK faster if you can just focus on set ideas. Because a DDK is often a DDK because they're simply missing a few basic understandings, and it will have nothing to do with their experience, i.e., just playing won't help. Okay, interesting. I've always thought of those kinds of mistakes as something that you just kind of buff out with more games, but let's see what else you have to say. I have a student who I've been working with for a month now, and they have played Go for 2 years and are 18Q. When I took this student on, they told me they had played for 2 years and were still 18Q. I could only imagine what was in store for me. However, we have finally started to break the mold through finding things they kept doing that were making it so that they couldn't take this step forward. Anyway, I think there are a lot of good techniques I don't see teachers often apply in their teaching, and this is one I suggest the most for teachers to incorporate if not having done so. Thanks for the comment, Paige. I would like to know a little more specifics on how you managed to do that. I don't know what I would do if I saw a player make very basic mistakes, like, you know, getting pushed to the first line and getting captured. I would actually encourage them to do that more and get captured a bunch of times. So I'm not sure, I wonder what your technique is and what you would do to demonstrate that that's not a good thing to do. Because honestly, I remember making that mistake myself. It's weird because this is one of the things that DDKs do that I remember doing. Obviously DDK is a very big range as well. It's, not every DDK is making those mistakes, but this is one of those beginner mistakes that I made where I would get pushed to the first line, and my buddy, he would say, "You really like that first line, huh?" And that was his hint of stop doing that. And I don't know, at one point I realized that was not the way to go, but I always thought it was just experience. So I'm curious to know what you would think about how to teach that actual method, and what you would point out to them to help them grasp things faster. But very interesting thoughts, and thanks so much for writing in. Trace Reynolds writes, for beginners, I think thinking is fun and really simple terms. It happens with chess as well. They love the game so much they cannot simplify. Once you are in a medium level, things improve. I'm having a little trouble deciphering this comment. I think you're kind of saying that something about the passion aspect of it, and where like you are, enamored by the game at a certain point, but then you don't want to, do the work. I don't know. I'm grasping at straws here. But anyway, I really appreciate your comment either way. The Hoarding Hunter writes, huge fan, keep up the amazing work. Thanks so much for the support, the Hoarding Hunter. Saventus writes, teachers should converse with their students. Why did you play there, etc. Try to help build up the logic. I recall that Fujisawa Shuko would harshly chastise his students if they could not answer the why, and he would sometimes also praise a bad move if it had good logic behind it. Professional players flocked to his study meetings in droves for this reason, to get a taste of the old master's logic, his way of thinking about the game. I love that. I've never heard of Fujisawa Shuko, but that's great. I think, you should praise students for making bad moves if they have good reasoning behind it, and you just have to adjust their flight path a little bit. Continuing on, we don't need teachers to point out good and bad moves. The AI is there for that. What is required is building up the logic, the way to think about the game. Yes, I think that the undervalued part of the teacher is the approach setting. I feel like everyone basically is on the same page about this. But I do think that there is value in pointing out good and bad moves, even though that AI has done that. I think that AI is tricky. When AI says that a move is bad or good, you don't know why. But the teacher knows why. Well, they may not know why, but I feel like there's a better filter of what good and bad is from a teacher's point of view than from an AI's point of view, which is strictly rigid and calculating. Sometimes the teacher, over time, experiencing and then allowing the students to experience, this is a good move, this is a bad move, this is a good move, this is a bad move, can really help train their eye and intuition on that matter. So I do think there is some value in that, but what is more important is setting the right approach to the game. Continuing on, Jeff from the, sorry, I'm not reading a new email. Saventus is continuing and mentioning somebody else. Jeff from the MikGo channel is very good at this. It's the main value a teacher can bring to the table, since you can do everything else yourself. I'm gonna have to check out Jeff. I've never heard of this channel, so I'll have to see what that's about, because you're recommending it. Continuing, boosting the students' Go logic is a fast track to improvement in my opinion. I think Go Inside and the others who simply say, believe me, this is good, and play this, are wrong. Especially concerning how to teach adult Westerners who have not had the benefit of learning Go as a child. Ooh, hot take here, spicy. So, you know what? I'm not gonna... I've kind of bought into that logic to say that you should just kind of look at a move and say and believe your teacher when your teacher says this is good and this is bad. I think that the problem with the strategy of reasoning, it can get too much. It's only, so much reasoning can only help to a certain extent. If you're telling somebody how to do something over and over again, it doesn't always stick. You just have to tell them, here's an example that I thought of. Tennis. If I'm telling you, you have to grip the racket a certain way, and I want you to swing the racket with this grip, the student will just take the racket at that grip, and listen to what the teacher says, because the teacher knows what's best, and swing the racket that way. But if the student says, why do we grip the racket this way? Why don't we grip it another way? Imagine the student has these ideas like, oh, let's grip the racket where the butt of the racket is facing up, and you use that kind of like silly ping pong table tennis grip. And the teacher spends an hour explaining the history of racket grips and what happened and why and what the biomechanics of the movement are. And what is that tennis lesson? That is not a tennis lesson. That is a history lesson. That is a biomechanics lesson. That is not gonna help you be better at tennis. What's gonna be better is if the teacher says, no, stop asking those silly questions and just grab the racket the way I tell you to and do what I tell you to do. And that is the fastest way for that student to improve. Of course, there are situations where you should know why. Why am I trying to hit the ball to the right side of the player when they are on this side of the court? The teacher will explain, oh, what you're trying to do is there's a strategy that you hammer on that side because blah, blah, blah. I don't know anything about tennis, so I don't know what to say in this example. There are those moments. Yes, you do need to explain the reasoning, but not always. I think sometimes you just got to listen to the teacher. And then once you play tennis, you're like, I know what teacher wants me to hold the racket this way. I've played so many games. This makes sense. This feels good. I don't imagine holding the racket any other way, but only by listening to the teacher can you fully realize that was good advice. That's a very good topic to talk about. It's very interesting. Thanks for your insightful comment, and Saventus. And then finally, we have DJ 74033 writing, I really do think I need a teacher that assigns homework to better continue my study. My mind sways too easily, and I have been playing a lot of Balatro instead of Go. As an adult and parent, it is really hard to set yourself up with weekly tasks, I find. Thanks for your comment, DJ, and I've been looking to play Balatro, and I'm scared because I feel like I'm going to get addicted. But back to the Go stuff, I guess you're like me. I want homework. I want something to do. I want like a regimen, but not everyone's like that. And I think it's good that we have different teaching styles, because some teachers will assign homework, some people won't, some people like homework, some people don't, and it's all about finding the right match. So I think there's a bit of a matchmaking going on with the teacher-student realm. But thanks so much for writing in, DJ. The question of the week is, have you ever used your intuition to win a game? Do you have any stories about how your intuition kicked in and helped inform what you're supposed to do in a game? And how do you feel during a game? Do you think too much, or do you feel? If you want to let me know about the answer to that question, or if you have another Go story to share, or have another question you want to ask me, you can comment on YouTube or the Reddit post for this episode, or if you want, you can email me directly at starpointbaduk@gmail.com. That's starpointbaduk@gmail.com. And if you're a YouTube listener, I would greatly appreciate a like and a subscribe if you haven't. And if you're a podcast listener, a review and a rating would also help. Thanks so much to Jeffrey H., James B., and John M. for supporting Starpoint. I once met a guy named Giovanni, and everyone just called him G, for short. But he would get into a lot of legal trouble, legal battles, and he'd be sued a lot. And he had repeat encounters with a particular lawyer named Sarah. And Sarah always was able to present the critical evidence at the right time. And G would just comment and say, what a clever move. And that, in a courtroom environment, in the serious environment where Sarah is so, not thanked for a lot of her work, it gave her a sense of purpose every time that G commented that was a clever piece of evidence. And so out of all the people that she sued throughout her career, she loved to sue G the most. I'll let that one sink in. Thanks for listening. Keep playing Go.